While you are worrying about paying your bills in 2026, Warren Buffett is quietly sitting on the largest pile of cash in human history. He knows exactly what is coming, and it is not what the mainstream media is telling you. What if I told you the next financial crash is not an accident, but a carefully engineered trap? A trap designed to take the last of your wealth and hand it directly to the 1%. Look at your savings account right now. If you leave it there during the upcoming collapse, it will evaporate. The elites do not want you to know this, but 2026 is not a recession. It is a harvest. And today, you are going to learn the exact blueprint billionaires use to turn this terrifying crash into a massive fortune before it is too late.
Educational and historical content only, not financial advice.
Listen closely. The financial system you trust is not a free market. It is a carefully managed farm. And you need to understand exactly what role you play in it. For decades, the middle class has been treated as the ultimate cash crop. When the economy is booming, the elites at the top open the floodgates of easy money. They lower interest rates. They hand out credit cards. They approve mortgages you can barely afford. And they tell you on every news channel that the stock market will only go up. They desperately want you to feel rich. They want you to buy the bigger house, the new car, and invest every spare dollar into their system. This is not generosity. This is the fattening phase. They are feeding the crop. But every farmer knows that after the feeding comes the inevitable harvest. Think back to 1929. The Roaring Twenties convinced everyday people that the economic party would never end. Millions borrowed money they did not have just to buy stocks. And when the trap was finally sprung, that wealth did not just disappear into thin air. It simply changed hands. The elites bought up the nation for pennies on the dollar. The exact same cycle brutally repeated in 2008. The mainstream media told you real estate was a guaranteed sure thing. Banks handed out subprime loans like candy. And when the music abruptly stopped, millions of hardworking people lost their homes while Wall Street received a massive government bailout and then quietly bought back those very same properties at rock-bottom prices. History does not repeat itself, but it always rhymes. And right now, as we face the harsh realities of 2026, the machinery of the greatest harvest in modern history has already been turned on. The easy money era is officially dead. The trap has been perfectly set. The middle class is fully leveraged, drowning in hidden debt, and completely blind to the fact that the smartest money in the room is quietly heading for the exits. Let me ask you a question. Why is it that every financial advisor, every banker, and every mainstream news anchor tells you the exact same thing when the market starts to crash? They look directly into the camera and say, "Do not panic. Hold on to your investments. Think long term." They preach the gospel of holding, as if it is the only way to build wealth. But have you ever stopped to wonder why they are so desperate for you to stay invested? It is not because they care about your financial freedom. It is because they desperately need you to provide the liquidity. The big players, the massive institutional investors, cannot sell billions of dollars in overvalued stocks unless there is someone on the other side willing to hold the line. You are their safety net. You are left holding the heavy bag while the smart money quietly exits out the back door. This is the grand illusion of long-term investing taught to the masses. It conditions the middle class to blindly absorb the devastating losses, while the elites take their massive profits and run. But the stock market is only one half of the trap. The other half is much more insidious, and it is sitting right in your pocket. It is the invisible debt trap. For the last decade, we have lived in an unprecedented era of free money. Interest rates were pushed down to practically zero. Anyone could get a loan for almost anything. You were aggressively told that taking on massive debt to buy a bigger house, a luxury car, or a lifestyle you could not actually afford was just a normal part of the modern dream. People looked at their constantly rising home values and their green investment portfolios, and they felt incredibly wealthy. But they were not truly wealthy. They were fake rich. Real wealth is not built borrowed money that can be ruthlessly called back by the bank at any moment. Fake rich is having a $1 million home with an $800,000 mortgage. Fake rich is driving a $90,000 car on a grueling 7-year lease. Fake rich is a fragile illusion built on the arrogant assumption that the economy will never falter. It relies on the psychological comfort of the herd. The dangerous belief that because everyone else is heavily in debt, it must be perfectly safe. But safety in numbers is a deadly myth in the financial world. When the music finally stops and the cost of borrowing skyrockets like it is doing right now, the illusion shatters into a million pieces. The middle class is currently drowning in an inescapable sea of credit card debt, auto loans, and variable rate mortgages. They are completely financially paralyzed. They have absolutely no dry powder left. Every single paycheck is already spoken for, just to service the rising interest on the debt they used to buy things they did not even need. And this is exactly where the architects of the system want them, because a population drowning in debt cannot buy valuable assets when they go on massive sale. A population drowning in debt is desperate. And desperation is the exact emotion the 1% needs to execute the greatest wealth transfer in human history. When the brutal harvest begins in 2026, those who are fake rich will be the very first ones to lose everything, while those who understand the real rules of the game are waiting patiently in the shadows. While the middle class is completely trapped in this inescapable web of debt. The smartest investor in history is making a move that should terrify anyone paying attention. Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, the man who famously told you to be greedy when others are fearful, is currently hoarding the largest mountain of cash his company has ever seen in its entire history. Berkshire Hathaway is sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars in pure liquidity, and he has been aggressively selling off his most prized stocks. Why would the ultimate long-term investor suddenly pull so much money out of the market? The mainstream media will casually tell you he simply cannot find good deals, or that he is just being slightly cautious in a weird economy. But that is a dangerous underestimation of a true financial predator. Buffett is not acting out of caution. He is acting out of absolute certainty. He is looking at the exact same economic indicators you are. The inverted yield curves, the insane housing prices, the unsustainable consumer debt. And he is quietly preparing his weapon of choice. For years, the so-called financial experts have loudly proclaimed that cash is trash. They aggressively warned you that inflation would eat away your purchasing power, forcing you to keep throwing your hard-earned money into a dangerously overvalued stock market just to survive. The crowd believed them. The crowd blindly dumped their savings into the casino because they were terrified of losing value. But Buffett understands a fundamental truth that the middle class completely ignores. In the middle of an inflationary boom, cash is a liability. But right before a massive economic collapse, cash is absolute, undisputed power. It is weaponized liquidity. When the margin calls hit in 2026, when the overleveraged funds are forced to liquidate their massive holdings, and when the fake rich are desperately trying to sell their luxury homes just to avoid total bankruptcy, the man with the cash gets to set the price. He does not negotiate, he dictates. Buffett is not sitting on the sidelines because he is afraid of losing money. He is sitting on the sidelines because he is patiently waiting for the blood to start flowing in the streets of Wall Street. He knows that in a true liquidity crisis, assets do not just drop by 10 or 20%. They brutally fall off a cliff. They get fire sold for pennies on the dollar. The very people who mocked him for holding cash during the recent bull run will be the exact same people begging him to buy their assets to save them from complete ruin. This is the quiet step of the prophet. He understands that extreme patience is the ultimate form of aggression in finance. While the average investor is frantically checking their portfolio every single day, hoping the red numbers will miraculously turn green, the 1% are sleeping peacefully on a massive war chest of dry powder. They are not worried about the 2026 crash. They are eagerly anticipating it, because it is the exact mechanism they will use to buy the world at a staggering discount. So how exactly does this massive transfer of wealth happen in real time? It is not a sudden explosion. It is a terrifyingly predictable domino effect. When the market finally cracks, the first domino to fall is the heavily leveraged investor. The major brokers and banks will issue margin calls, ruthlessly demanding immediate cash to cover plummeting positions. But because the fake rich are already drowning in debt, they will have absolutely no cash to give. They will be forced to sell everything, their tech stocks, their crypto, their real estate, at the exact worst possible moment. This massive wave of forced liquidation will drive asset prices down even further, creating a brutal downward spiral that feeds on its own momentum. And this is where the psychological warfare truly begins. The average American will watch their 401k get absolutely decimated. Day after day, they will see their life savings melting away on their computer screens. Panic will set in like a virus. The media will scream that this time it is different, that the global economy might never recover, and out of sheer desperation, the middle class will do the one thing that will permanently lock them into poverty. They will capitulate, they will cash out, they will drain their retirement accounts at the absolute bottom of the market, willingly paying massive tax penalties and early withdrawal fees just to stop the psychological bleeding. They will trade their most valuable long-term assets for rapidly depreciating cash, out of pure, unadulterated fear. This is the tragic flaw of human psychology. We are biologically wired to run away from pain, and watching your net worth drop by 50% is excruciating psychological pain. But the financial market does not care about your feelings. It is a cold, calculating machine perfectly designed to separate the emotional from their money. The 1% understand this completely. They view the market not with panic, but with clinical detachment. While the retail investor is crying over their shrinking 401k, the billionaire is looking at a spreadsheet, patiently executing a mathematical equation. They know that a financial crisis is simply a forced transfer of assets from the impatient to the patient. Once the middle class has completely surrendered, the harvest truly begins. The elites, the ones who have been quietly sitting on their mountains of dry powder like Warren Buffett, will step out of the shadows. They do not buy when the market is slowly dropping. They buy when the people are actively screaming. They will open their massive war chests and scoop up prime suburban real estate, blue chip stocks, and entire profitable businesses for pennies on the dollar. They are not stealing your wealth. They do not have to, because the system is designed to make you willingly hand it over to them out of sheer panic. The wealth does not evaporate. It simply changes hands, from the overleveraged to the highly liquid. The 2026 crash is more than a giant financial vacuum, sucking the remaining capital out of the middle class and depositing it directly into the vaults of the 1%. They will accumulate generational wealth in a matter of months, wealth that will take the middle class decades to rebuild, if they ever recover at all. This is the cruel reality of the 2026 harvest. But here is the most important truth you will ever hear about the financial markets. You cannot stop the collapse, you cannot vote it away, and you certainly cannot wish it away. The massive machinery of the 2026 harvest is already in motion. But while you cannot change the terrifying weather, you can absolutely choose exactly where you stand when the brutal storm finally hits. You can passively choose to remain the crop, blindly waiting to be brutally harvested. Or you can step out of the field right now and become the harvester. To do this, you must adopt the exact blueprint of the 1%. You must start thinking like a cold, calculating predator instead of the desperate prey. The first critical step is to ruthlessly accumulate your own mountain of dry powder. This means aggressively hoarding cash and highly liquid assets right now. While the rest of the world is still blindly spending on maxed out credit cards, do not listen to the average financial advisors who tell you that holding cash is a guaranteed massive loss to inflation. In the middle of a terrifying liquidity crisis, cash is not a loss. It is the ultimate undeniable ammunition. If you do not have dry powder when the global market crashes by 50 or 60%, you are just a helpless spectator watching the greatest fire sale in human history from the miserable sidelines. The second step in this elite blueprint is to brutally sever your chains to bad debt. You must immediately eliminate any high-interest consumer debt you are currently carrying. Credit cards, expensive car loans, variable rate mortgages. These are the invisible chains that will violently drag you down to the bottom of the ocean when the economic tide suddenly goes out. The financial elites use massive debt to buy income-producing assets, but the middle class uses debt to buy rapidly depreciating liabilities. You must ruthlessly flip that script immediately. If you heavily owe the banking system money when the global economy collapses, they completely own you. They will arrogantly dictate your choices, and they will force you to liquidate whatever tiny assets you have left just to financially survive. But if you are entirely debt-free with cash in hand, you are completely untouchable. You become financially bulletproof. And finally, the most difficult step of all, you must completely master the dark art of emotional detachment. You have to aggressively train your mind to stop reacting like the panicked herd. When you see the stock market violently bleeding red, when the terrified news anchors are screaming that the absolute end of the financial world is finally here, when your over-leveraged neighbors are panic selling their beautiful homes, you cannot afford to feel fear. You must feel a quiet excitement. You must learn to look at a violently collapsing stock chart and smile, because that is exactly what Warren Buffett is doing in his office right now. He does not see global destruction. He sees a massive historic transfer of wealth being handed directly to him on a silver platter. The top 1% have absolutely mastered the ability to detach their fragile human emotions from their hard-earned money. They know perfectly well that cold logic and extreme relentless patience are the only things that permanently separate the wealthy from the permanently poor. If you can flawlessly execute this very simple blueprint, 2026 will not be the tragic year you lose everything. It will be the exact moment you begin building your own untouchable generational empire. The choice is entirely yours. The year 2026 is going to be ruthless. It will completely wipe out the remaining middle class, but it will also create a brand new generation of millionaires from the ashes. History does not have any pity for the unprepared, and the market does not care if you lose your life savings. You can either be the one panicking when the devastating crash happens, or you can be the one sitting on a mountain of cash, ready to buy the absolute best assets on earth for pennies on the dollar. Do not let the elites harvest your hard-earned wealth. It is time to step out of the matrix and take back control of your financial destiny. If you want to survive the upcoming collapse and learn the hidden wealth secrets of the top 1%, you need to be fully prepared. Hit that subscribe button to Mindset for Wealth right now. Join our community of independent thinkers who refuse to be victims of the system. We will continue to decode the history of money and bring you the ultimate survival blueprints for the coming financial storm. The clock is ticking, and the greatest wealth transfer in human history has already begun. Do not get left behind. Subscribe today, and I will see you in the next video.